you will watch on this podcast.
We're talking about challenging our economic system of capitalism.
And what silly is that to make the food on one side and the drug on one side handled by the same administration?
A legal drug that they put on food so that consumers keep on consuming and consuming and consuming.
Your kids get trapped in a whole system that does not allow you even to think.
Keep people sick so that they are more reliant on the drug industry and end up being lifetime patients.
But at the end of the day, who makes the choice to go buy those foods?
Great question, and it points to one of the deepest philosophical issues that we have, the conversation around personal responsibility.
Welcome back to the Wellness Billion podcast, my friends. So nice seeing you, so nice hearing about you, and so nice reading your comments on the past podcasts and past topics. Today we have again a very special guest from LA. So we have a very big time difference from Morocco to LA tonight. For us, it's the night. For him, it's morning, right? I think
Yes,
morning,
indeed.
evening. So I really want to thank you, David, for your time, and thank you for being part of this podcast. Karim, I'm going to let you introduce briefly the guest before David can introduce himself.
Yeah, well, hi, David. Hi to all the audience. Indeed, we have a fantastic guest today. David Wyss is a visionary in the field of nutrition and mental health. He's very in mental health. You're going to see during the podcast. He's renowned for challenging conventional approaches and pioneering innovative methods to improve life through food and wellness. He's a very independent thinker, and you will see that along the podcast that his visions are sometimes getting us to think a little bit. So, Dave, I leave you the floor to introduce yourself and add something about who you are and what got you to this journey of wellness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Reporting from West Los Angeles. Thrilled to be here. I am a mental health scientist, which means I do research on topics, eating disorders and food addiction, nutrition for depression. I have a clinical practice that I've been doing for about 13 years where I meet one-on-one with folks and just try to kickstart revolutions in their ways of living, in ways of thinking, in ways of being. So I'm very fortunate. And then I get to do a lot of different things. I also can have my mobile app. So I stay very busy, very blessed to have a beautiful family, two daughters, a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old right now. So life is in session. It's great. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
That's great. Well, we're going to get right into it. So David, I'm going to let you read the first key points of the first article that we're going to tackle today.
Yes, indeed. You sent me a topic related to nutrition, and looks like the title is that salad isn't just good for your nutrition, it may help stave off depression. 3 quotes from the article. Americans now derive most of their calories in a less than optimal way. According to the U.S. National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, U.S. adults obtain 57% of their calories from ultra-processed foods like packaged pizza and sugary beverages. And for children and teens, that share rises to 67%. In a randomized controlled trial known as SMILES, 32.3% of those in the dietary group had no reported symptoms of depression, compared with 8% of those in the social support group. And lastly, the moods of all participants improved by the end of 6 months, but the diet group did better. Their depression scores fell by 45%, compared with 26.8% in the social group.
Yeah, well, those are pretty striking figures. My first question to you, gentlemen, is with this rise of ultra-processed food, how can public health initiatives realistically shift people's eating habits to prioritize mental health? How do you see that?
I have thoughts. Ultra-processed foods are all the buzz right now, especially here in the U.S. There's just a lot of research and a lot of contention and debate surrounding them. It's pretty obvious that we need to, tackle the food environment. And it seems like the only way to do that is by intervening with the food manufacturers, the mega corporations that have a lot of money and a lot of power. And it seems like the only way to really do that is through policy. And it's really tricky because we're talking about challenging our economic system of capitalism, right? Like these companies have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, and to ask them to make less money is a very tough sell. But when you can position it as critical for public health and actually something that's going to save us money in other ways, it can become imperative. There have been times in history where food companies have made an effort to reformulate some of their foods. The example is Kraft. Many years ago, when there was a lot of public health response to the quote unquote obesity epidemic, Kraft did try to reformulate some foods and remove some sugars and salts and fats, and their shares tanked. And what ended up happening was they decided to put all those calories and ingredients back in the food to maintain their profit level. So we're going to need a lot of public awareness. We're going to need a lot of probably lawsuits, and real change at the level of the food supply. And it's going to be challenging because there's a lot of people that don't have great access to food insecurity, and there's a lot of social issues.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I cope with most of what you're saying. I'm struck by the fact that companies that you just mentioned, like Kraft has not the same processing of food in the US that they have in England. They don't have the same processing of food that they have in France or that they have in Africa or Asia. They have a different way to process food. And I've been reading articles that were saying that the food in America mainly, which is US and Canada, is much more processed than it is in England or in Europe, depending on the regulations that we're facing. And I think this is all about regulation. And those companies, those multinationals heading to maximum profit or optimal profit they can do, have to tweak their food just to get into the level of regulation where they won't be annoyed by the governments that they belong to.
So I have a question about this, because now we're talking, for example, David, you talked about lawsuits. Okay, that's great. We can sue some companies that do ultra processed food. But at the end of the day, who makes the choice to go buy those foods?
Great question. And it points to one of the deepest philosophical issues that we have, the conversation around personal responsibility versus public health. It seems like there are people that really like concepts of personal responsibility, usually people that have it or people that deeply want it. But in public health, in population health, we have to go beyond personal responsibility and think about the environment that either supports or distracts people from being able to reach their goals. So I deeply connect with the idea of putting the onus on the individual. But realistically, that is actually part of the food companies and other corporations' playbook. They want to deflect it on the people so that the attention is not on them. It is a very strategic manipulation of the conversation to saying, you know what? Consumers should have choice. Why are you trying to take away consumer choice? If consumers want it, they should buy it. And I've been deeply studying what we call the commercial determinants. These are all the different factors that affect how commercial actors are able to control the narrative and influence policy to basically get their bottom line needs met. And one of their most effective tactics has been in creating front groups. These are organizations that look like something they're not. And also what we call astroturf organizations. These are fake grassroots movements. An example I'll give, and this is to your point, I like it a lot. Your point is so important. They started something called the Center for Consumer Freedom. This was 1996. It's a huge website. And if you go on there, you learn they're like, hey, we need power to the people. And they formed all these smokers' rights groups, to protect people. They're saying, why is the government trying to infringe on our rights and our freedoms? We should have the choice. But when you dig deep, that movement was actually funded by the tobacco companies and the food companies. So they are fueling this desire for personal agency among people so that we focus on our behaviors rather than holding them accountable for their harms. I'll give you one more example. Did you know that the term litter bug was coined by the plastic industry? Incredible genius PR. Wow. They sat around and they said, hey, you know what? Let's develop a term and let's spread it through the media. And what people took from that is, don't be a litter bug. If there are problems with plastic in the environment, it's on the people. You need to stop being a litter bug. So it was a genius manipulation of psychological processes to get people hyper-focused on personal responsibility instead of saying, hey, wait a minute. There's some corporations making billions of dollars while everyone else is sick and picking up trash. What's up? So this is the difference between individual health and public health. And I'm very fortunate to have my PhD in public health and also work with people. So I can always think about problems in both arenas.
Yeah, when you see what you're mentioning is about the super marketing capacity or marketing super capacity of those big groups to manipulate the opinion on whatever. Remember that about 25 to 30 years ago, all over the world, what was considered as bad was fat. Whereas at the same time, carbs was considered as an energy food. And for 20 to 25 years to 30 years, maybe the people linked to political establishment were pushing for this carb thing against fat things. And after a while, we figured out that fat is in fact some fat, and most of the fat is really good. And carbs, which is the entry door of sugar, is really bad. And we verified it through continuous monitoring and getting people sicker and sicker because of the amount of sugar contained in an ultra processed food. Again, there is another example, a big one. When you remember when they prohibited the cigarette in the US, the cigarette companies started to buy snacks food. Why? Because they considered that snack was stewarding the cigarette and alcohol. So they started buying alcohol companies and snack food. So we all together looking at this ecosystem of big companies, getting this nutrition to people, making them the decisionaires of I'm buying it or I'm not buying it, with those such groups that you mentioned. I mean, I'm stroke. And at the end, you have political people like today, there is probably Kennedy is going to handle these regulation things on health, probably on Food and Drug Administration. And by the way, and I'll hand over the word to Yassine. When you look at the Food and Drug Administration, you have the Food and the Drug Administration together groups in the same office. I mean, what silly is that to make the food on one side and the drug on one side handled by the same administration, whereas they shouldn't have anything to do between.
Totally agree with what you say. They have nothing to do together. But the thing is that they're that big that working together makes them even more powerful. And when you think about ultra processed food, for me, I see kind of addictive substances that you eat and keep on eating and keep on wanting. So it's kind of a drug. It's kind of illegal, actually, a legal drug that they put on food so that consumers keep on consuming and consuming and consuming. But at the end of the day, for example, I'm going to give my personal example. When you start a pack of chips and you start eating one, mentally, you know that you can't stop at one and you're going to keep on eating a second and a third and a fourth. But it only comes to me and my own capability to stop. So at the end of the day, who has the last word or the last action to take? It's us. It's us as humans. Yeah, big companies make it super difficult to be able to stop or to change our habits. I totally agree with this. But at the end of the day, we are the ones that are choosing to consume those ultra processed food, because today you have a lot, you have maybe since COVID, maybe you have, I think, 50% more people eating real food because they understood what processed food does to your body. I will always remember something that I heard on online, and it comes from Conor McGregor, which is an MMA fighter, who said, "Why would I give to giving ultra processed food to my body is like punching my face. Why would I do that?" And this got stuck in my head. And every time I want to eat something like ultra processed, I'm like, maybe I'm going to hurt my body. And I think people need to understand that.
I have so many thoughts on ultra processed foods and related to our article, but I think it's worth making a point, which is that coming back to choice and choice, I agree with you. We have choice, right? Especially as individuals that are socially advantaged. But think about someone that has a lot of childhood trauma, has a lot of addictions, and doesn't have a lot of money, right? They don't have the same choice that the three of us might have. And that's where, or someone that's in the prison system, right? Someone that's in a mental health facility, right? So I agree that it does come back to human choice, but that conclusion does not extrapolate to the entire population. There are a lot of people that are much more socially
There
disadvantaged.
is another thing that lifts out the responsibility to people, which means that I don't particularly agree on the whole thing, is that those big companies, they put taste exhausters in the food, which means it's a kind of addictive product that they put so that we start, like Yassine, you just said, I'm eating my chips, I can't stop. And I
Yeah.
have the responsibility of doing, but they put addictive products in the product so that you can't stop. So
Yeah,
it's a
that's
kind
kind of
of,
the legal drug
it's a
that
legal
like
drug. So it
yeah.
could be assimilated to a drug, and it's not of your responsibility eating it because it's exhausting your taste, and you're eating it, not feeling any guilty or any way to think about it because you love it.
Exactly. It's a completely natural drug that people now accept and people know, and that's the worst. That's the worst part. I think that's the perfect time to be able to jump into the second article because it's related to marketing. Because
Hold on. I have one thing to say that David mentioned, which is very important.
sure,
It's the price issue, because when David, you mentioned that there's also the relation between the ultra processed food and the price we pay for it. I think also the schooling system has a huge responsibility. And most of the time, when you see, I mean, in America or in Europe or even here in Morocco, you see some demos on kitchen things, etc. Behind it, you see Coca-Cola, you see those ultra-processed food.
yeah,
Behind the cook who is gonna learn how to do a pizza or something like that. I mean, it's really your kids get trapped in a whole system that does not allow you even to think, because from your childhood you've been habituated to have those guys like Coca-Cola or those guys like Kraft or anybody else showing you the way of how to eat, quote unquote, properly.
The influence of corporations on nutrition cannot be overstated, the importance of that. And that is, I think, the political movement is disentangling that a little bit. I'll say one last piece before we move on back to the food and drug. I think the big conspiracy theory, at least here in the US, when thinking about the food supply, is why are these ingredients in the US and not in Europe, not in Australia? Is it truly just profit maximization? Is it like the colors and the preservatives are really just helping them sell more food and have it last longer? Or, and a lot of people are super uncomfortable with this conversation, and I don't have an answer, just posing the question, is the American public being deliberately poisoned so that they can end up on medications, right? Like, is there a little bit of a plot to keep people sick so that they are more reliant on the drug industry and end up being lifetime patients? And now I just want to say that I'm not saying that that's true, but it's also not implausible based on what we know about commercialism and capitalism, that these types of ploys could be cooked up in executive boardrooms, and people are able to hide behind corporations and not be held accountable. They're limited liability. So they can cause a lot of harm, externalize the harm, the cost of the harm onto society, and not ever be held. So I'm hopeful that we'll make some changes in the food supply here in the US, but I also know that deep pockets tend to get their way, you know?
Absolutely. That brings us to the second part of the podcast, which is the marketing part. So, Yassine, the floor is yours to tell us about the article.
So basically, the article says that 5 nutrition marketing strategies to elevate your fitness business, detailing in 3 points, which says low fat consumption is surprisingly associated with increased levels of depression. By eating a well-balanced diet and incorporating plenty of healthy, nutrient-dense foods such as fruit and vegetables, you're nourishing and fueling your body and brain in the best way possible, which ultimately helps you feel uplifted and energized. And finally, providing healthy options right where your clients work out is both convenient and mutually beneficial.
Yeah, well, that brings the question. So, do you guys believe fitness businesses risk overstepping their expertise by offering nutritional counseling? And how should they navigate this boundary?
David, I want you to answer first.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. You know, part of my training on my way to my more advanced graduate training, I was a certified personal trainer in the early days while I went to graduate school to become a registered dietitian. And one of the cultures that is real prevalent in my field of dietitians is this anger and angst toward people that are, practicing nutrition and not being a dietitian, right? People stepping out of their lane. And I just am so turned off by that assumption that there should be one group that is responsible for controlling the narrative around nutrition, right? Everyone eats. A lot of people have opinions and a lot of information to offer. So I don't believe that there is a nutrition consensus and that there should be one group of people that are allowed and everyone else isn't. There is licensure protection in some states. But that being said, it is well established, at least in my world, that fitness oriented nutrition can cause harm to people because it's very focused on maybe appearance related issues, right? And there's a lot of people that have diet trauma or have felt like their trainer pushed them too hard. They're putting tape measures around their body and telling them, what to eat. And it can be very traumatizing for people that have disordered eating and that have mental health challenges, body dysmorphia. So I think that, all people should be able to talk nutrition. There needs to be a mindfulness about the potential for harm. And nutrition is an area where people can be very well intentioned, but also, leave people with scars. I call it nutritionist trauma, right? From like getting a nutritionist that was pushing someone too hard, stepping them on the scale every day. That could be really helpful for one person, but not so great for the next. And the last thing I'll say there is that nutrition and fitness have been coupled. And a lot of times when people find out I am a nutritionist, they quickly assume that like we're going to talk grams of protein and, do an exercise routine. And I'm certainly into all of that. I lift weights. I'm very well versed and well trained in that. Most people don't think about nutrition as a vehicle by which they can improve their mood, their relational health, their quality of life. And I think that's the conversation that's really starting to pick up steam, especially for people that have felt traumatized by math-centric nutrition and weight-centric nutrition. There's a new message that's emerging, and it's, nutrition for mental health. Nutritional psychology is one term, nutritional psychiatry. And it goes beyond fitness. And I just like to invite people to remember that nutrition can feel shallow sometimes when it's all about how you look and percent body fat, but it doesn't have to be shallow. Nutrition can be real deep. It can be something that we think about at the cellular, microbial, and even at the spiritual level. And that message resonates with a lot of people.
I totally agree. As someone that went through all those phases myself, I went through the scale phase. Actually, when I was younger, I was pretty. I wasn't obese, but I was pretty fat, and I was eating like tons of sugar as a kid, and way too much for my age actually. And that's when I gained a lot of fat. And then they put me through a nutritionist. And I remembered that I was eating like way too much salad, not enough nutrients. And this affected my mental health at some point. And I had some eating disorders. Why? Because every time I saw like a gram of sugar or whatever, I was like, oh no, this is not good. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. And automatically my mental health was destroyed because I was always thinking about calories and sugar. And oh no, this week I didn't lose 1 kg of whatever. I didn't lose anything. The weight in the scale is the exact same. And I feel that a lot of people are going through this. A lot of people are going through the numbers because numbers are indicators, which is good. You need to start with the numbers because you need to start knowing if you're doing something wrong or something bad. And the only way to know is the number in the scale at first, because then you come to your mental health. Are you good mentally, or are you only focused on your nutrition and mentally you're bad? Mentally you sleep thinking, but oh no, today I ate too much. Oh no, today I'm stressed and now I need to eat a chip. Oh no, today I ate a chip, and automatically your mental health is destroyed. So there's different phases about nutrition. And I personally advise to people to learn what they eat with a scale. So just to know, like knowledge of what do you eat, what are the macros of what you eat, and just to have a general knowledge, but then don't go too deep into it. Because if you go too deep into it, maybe you're going to have a great physique for a month. But after that month, you're going to be mentally destroyed. You're going to go back to your old habits, and voila, you're going to go back to zero. and you didn't do
Yeah, well,
anything.
but that depends on the people, because I also, like David mentioned, I also had a trauma about when I was 25. I got a brain tumor. It was a pituitary tumor, and it completely messed up all my hormones and so on and so forth. So I became like someone who was looking at his own health. I was in tech at the time already, and I was looking at my health like I would say a PhD guy. So I was looking at books, I was reading books. I'm not a practitioner per se, but I think I learned so much along the years because I had a trauma. And you're right, David. When you have a trauma, then you start thinking, which very few people do on a daily basis. Why? Because they're passive eaters. They have commercials on TV. They see things on the restaurant sides or the burger sides or pizza sides, whatever, and they are completely trapped in the social environment where they go toward the food that is the most sexy to them. Whereas those with a trauma early on, they think about food as something that can balance their body, as well as also the sports and mental health also. I started meditating very, very early on, etc., etc. And I figure out that after 25 years, also I was listening to my body. I was not eating what my body needed. Why? Because when I started to measure, and we'll come to it in the third topic, I found out that I had the diabetes type 2 after 25 years of eating what I thought was quote unquote clean eating. And I had a hypertension. So I said to myself, "Oh, Karim, there's something going on here. You should invent in your company a process for people to be able to passively measure what they do and get nudged a little bit toward better eating, knowing whatever they eat, what it does to their body." And I think this trauma helps people have a second thought of what they're doing. And in my case, I wasn't right all the time. I had it in my face when I found out I had diabetes. But I believe that you become much more thoughtful when you have a trauma than when you don't.
Yeah, I had terrible mental health challenges, addiction issues in my early 20s. And that's when I got into nutrition, when I was 24, drinking and started exercising and eating. And so I was deeply motivated for health, not just because of virtue, but really out of survival.
Yeah, yeah. And you see, this occurred to you. You see, it occurred to you. It occurred to me. But I would say, fortunately or not, also depending on the situation, when you're not in front of a wall, when you have no other option but think about what you're doing, because you have to rise up your survival mechanism, then you're like everybody in face of a super buffet that restaurants, commercials, everybody's offering you, and then you get trapped.
At the end, it's really about understanding your priorities, and people need to understand that health, their own health, should be their priorities. It's it's a no-go for someone not to take care of their health, and sometimes people understand that way too late, and that's a pity. And then they like, oh, I should have done something before. And I strongly believe as well that thanks to social media, people are becoming more aware of that, and that's great.
Yeah, figure out your sister Nina. She has autoimmune disease. She went into one of the most prestigious French business school, and then she decided to go toward precision nutrition with disordered nutrition, because when she had this disorder in her body, like autoimmune disease, she found out that she couldn't control what she was eating. She couldn't control the effect of what she was eating on her body. And she decided to go in the US. And now she's at UCL London to go on eating, to do a master's on eating disorders. And I think she was also traumatized she was what age? 20? She was at UCLA. Visiting UCLA, and she got traumatized one day to the other, and then she became an addict of learning how we can handle eating disorders.
Well, Karim, you can move on with the third topic.
Yes, yes, yes. It's a topic I love. Okay, so the article goes like this. The impact of AI powered nutrition apps on dietetics. David, you know what I'm talking about? A survey from RX Food reports time saving of 75% of healthcare provider to attain diet history. And against RX Food has partnered with Dexcom, a continuous glucose monitoring system, here we are, offering real-time recommendation for individuals with diabetes, resulting in A1C reductions of 1.3% for individuals with type 2 diabetes and 0.8% for those with type 1 diabetes. Advanced algorithms in deep learning make it possible for apps to automatically differentiate food items, estimate portion sizes, and predict ingredients through a one meal photo. That's exactly what we're doing, guys, in our company, Opinion. What do you think about this perspective, David?
Yeah, so I'm also into tech and leveraging technology and believe in monitoring and tracking. But I think I can offer some alternative ideas as well, just to be conversational and to be open minded. I think if you were to truly look at the data that we have around health, whether it be mental health or cardiometabolic factors, as we've seen more and more information become available, people are still not, trends are not easily changing, right? In other words, they rolled out the calories in all the restaurants 20 or so years ago. And like, did that actually change anything? Can we say that calories changed a lot? And I think it's pretty obvious. No, we live in a world now where you can search for anything. Most average people could go on to a language learning model and get a 7-day menu, just get a meal plan, right? Like, it almost is safe to say, and this is coming from someone that's in the information technology space, it is safe to say that lack of information is not the real problem. And that one of the reasons why people struggle with behavior change, especially with food, is because life is hard, man. The stress, the adversity, the challenges that people face in day-to-day life, trying to get by, to make ends meet, to balance all the things mixed with the convenience of eating, makes it very difficult for people to do well. And so I want to add that and say that, yeah, we need technology. We need data points. We need nudges. We need what you're working on, what I'm working on. But we also need to help people get into what I call recovery and help them calm their nervous system and be able to like face life differently and to heal relationships. If people have deep underlying conflict where they don't sleep good at night, there's just some relational rupture and they're having a hard time. Am I convinced that the nudge from the app or that the data is the thing that's going to move them in a new direction? Probably not. So we need technology. And I think this was mentioned in the article as well, but we also need humans. We also need people that care. We need people to give hugs. We need people to support each other, social support. We need a lot of positive reinforcement in order to turn the ship around, as we call it. And I think the technology is a huge part of that, but not the entire part of that.
Yes, I agree in a sense, but also we have to see at society as it is today. David, figure out that most people probably on COVID, and we know it, and after COVID, get more and more lonely.
Yes.
So they're in face of their screen, they're in face of TV, they're in face of technology, name it, but they're lonely. So these hugs you're talking about is a blast. Is the ideal situation. And I think we have to face the situation as it is today. What is the percentage of loneliness, let's say, in the world, particularly in the developed countries, because we're talking about that? It's getting higher and higher and higher every day. And also there is another issue that we have to get related. I think that people should be inspired. Like we have a moonshot in our company, which is inspired, ultra-personalized nutrition to cure metabolic diseases and its overaging domino effects. The most important word in all that moonshot phrase is inspire. How do you inspire? You inspire by getting people to be nudged through data that will be auto-generated and auto-evaluated by themselves. Not you, not me, not anybody else. When they will need to come to you, which is very few people that can afford it, also in the US, having your counseling, your stewardship, and so on and so forth, then they will be in a fantastic situation. And you have a second point, apart from data. You have the influence of all the marketing mechanisms that are coming over, that are hitting the brain in the pituitary part, which is the part of pleasure, saying to them, no, do this and do that. This is not harmful. People in marketing, they lie, but it's a blend lie to bring people to do things that will cure them one way or another, which is not true. And that's why I said one size doesn't fit all in diet. We should be very, very aware of the capacity of those data points to nudge us to something that goes well with us. And something else to end with that is that probably you do it with your clients, David. You teach them how to try to listen to their body, because the main explorer of what happens to you is yourself.
I'm gonna take on that, which because I just read something about this today, which is listening to your body. There's listening and knowing what your body needs, and those are two different things, because it's very good to be able to listen to your body, but it's even better to know what your body needs. And I'm gonna rebound also on what David said, which is the fact that we live in a very stressful world, which is very complicated to balance everything. And actually, for me, I strongly believe that balance doesn't exist. If you want to do something, you have to go 100% in, and if you're trying to balance everything, you're gonna be again mentally destroyed, because it's impossible to balance your work, to balance your social life, to balance your health, to balance your food, to balance everything. This is impossible. Like I've tried personally, I didn't manage. You have to give up on one or two. But the thing is that yes, technology is gonna help us to become even healthier. I agree. It's not everything. We definitely need human contact. We definitely need those hugs that David was talking about, because it's important to feel understood. Because technology can tell us what we have to do to become better. But when we have a meaningful discussion with someone that can understand us and can give us their own experience and kind of steward us toward our process, it's even better. But again, and I'm going to rebound from some other points that we talked about, which is cost effective. Today, as a coach, you can't help everybody. To be able to grow, your prices are going to grow. To be able to help as many people as you can, you need to integrate technology into your practice in a meaningful way, and not only be managed by technology. But if we can use us as coaches and nutritionists and whatever technology to be able to help more people in a meaningful way, that's the beauty of technology and the beauty of AI in our industry.
Yeah, the integration piece is everything. And I realize I have a bias based on my training in public health. In public health, one of the things we tend to do is think about what we call forgotten groups, like missed opportunities. So I've been, using my app. It's launched, but not fully launched, if you know what I mean. I've been using it in my practice for about a year. And, the pattern that I see is there are people who they come in and they're ready and they're motivated and they're technologically savvy, and they show up for sessions, they log their meals, they do all the modules, and they do great, right? They tend to do fantastic, life-changing stuff in a matter of 6 weeks. But then, of course, I'm deeply curious about the people that might just feel defeated by the technology. Maybe they're not savvy, or feel shame about what they're eating and don't want to log it, right? The people that don't connect as well with technology and with AI, that feel a strong sense of disconnect from it, almost as if they have an old soul that just wants to be by the river in community. And like the technology is very supportive for some people, and other people find it disruptive and challenging. And so right now I'm thinking more about the missed opportunities, the people that struggle with the data and with the inputs and outputs a lot. trying to think about how to reach some of the people that are having more challenges with integrating technology into their healthcare. And usually it has to do with mental health, some of the stuff we talked about today.
Yeah, I have a good friend, which happens to be one of the most potent morbidly obese specialist in the south of France. I had lunch with him about 3 weeks ago, and he was explaining to me that the entry door for morbid obesity is not food, is not a lack of healthy lifestyle, is stress. And out of stress, everything is completely destroyed and disconnected. But back to the technology, I have another view, David. I think that AI will overwhelm our lives to the extent that it will be everywhere. It will be so everywhere that you won't even feel it. And it will be so helpful in some cases that people will handle AI and all those tools that are around AI, like when they started using cars instead of using horses. And this AI is now generative AI as we know it. I mean, we use AI for about probably 10 to 11 years in our company, but really AI was known only 2 years ago. So now it'll be embedded in everything. And whatever you do in your fridge, in your car, in your phone, in your computer, in your bathroom, wherever you go. So that your experience with AI, and that's where you intended to do, because we know it's coming over, and it's a wake-up call that a lot of people, and I agree with you when you say that some people will be probably reluctant to it. It's not a question of being reluctant or not. It's a question of AI being everywhere, so that you cannot be reluctant or not, because it's a part of your life for the good and for the worse, because it can tweak your food. It can do some harm when it's not controlled. I just wrote a book about it called Renaissance Now. All this is a whole of our evolution. And I think you as a specialist practitioner, PhD, Yassine, with his experience, and me as an addict of wellness, we should really be aware of what's happening in the society to be able to prepare the people that are around us to embed it and to use it as wisely as possible, because it's here.
Very well said.
Exactly. Well, David, we're going to leave you the last word if you want to introduce anything in this podcast.
Yeah, I guess, I think our themes today were nutrition, mental health, and technology. And I'm seeing a future where we can bring all those things together and be supportive of folks. And we live in a world that's very polarizing at times, where people tend to fight over little stuff. And I call it infighting, right? And I just have a vision where human beings of different philosophies and different backgrounds, join forces and rise up to really improve public health, the health of the planet, and really push back on the monopolization of corporate interests, and really get into a world where health is valued by society and we are willing to stand up for it. I think it's happening. So thanks to both of you for being a part of that.
Oh, thank you, David, for being part of our podcast. It's sharing with the world. Yassine has over 2.7 million followers in the region. I'm more in tech, so I have much less followers than him, and I'm so proud of him. David, where can people find you?
So my homepage on the web is drdavidwiss.com. That's WISS. My app is called Wise Mind Nutrition, and that's wisemindnutrition.com. Of course, it's in the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. My clinical website is nutritioninrecovery.com. And I am on Instagram, Dr. David Wiss. Of course, you can find Wise Mind Nutrition on TikTok, YouTube. Pretty available and love engaging. I do respond to comments and messages, so hopefully can connect to some new folks.
Well, let the audience know. In the description, all the links are going to be on there so they can check your page. Again, David, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for accepting our invitation into this podcast. Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button so you don't miss the next episode. See you.
Bye.